So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kayla Rogers, and I'm an Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Women's Fund. For those of you who are not familiar, oh, that was very strange. That has never happened before. Oh, I'm so sorry. See, I'm always something new with Zoom. Yeah, that's very new. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Women's Fund, we are a not-for-profit organization located in Houston, and our mission is to provide women and girls with the tools they need to be advocates for their health. So we do this through focused seminars like today's presentation, as well as curriculum-based classes and publications. Our programming and publications are free. So if you are interested in learning more about us or seeing any upcoming events that we have, please visit our website, thewomensfund.org. There you can download free PDF versions of our publications or submit a publication request form for physical copies. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping. If you could remain on mute throughout the presentation, just so we could limit any distractions. If you do have questions, please feel free to place those in the chat at any time. We will have a question and answer session at the end. So if a question pops up, you can put it in the chat and we will address it at the end of the presentation. So today we are very excited to have a presentation over the mental impact of COVID on teens. We have Mallory Mensberg here from the Menninger Clinic. So a little bit about Mallory. She is a psychotherapist at the Bel Air location of the Menninger Clinic. She is a program coordinator for the Adolescent Intensive Outpatient Program. She works predominantly with adolescents aged 13 through 17, but has spent years working with clients of all ages. Her focus with adolescents is on anxiety, depression, and life transitions. Her previous focus was on interpersonal relationships, coping skills and strategies, and the effects of trauma. Having worked with survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault and abuse for several years, she has extensive experience working with trauma. She received her master's degree in counseling from the University of Houston and her bachelor's degree in human development and social relations from Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana. So Mallory, we are so grateful to have you here today and are looking forward to this presentation. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and turn the floor over to you.
Hi, everyone. Let's see if I can figure out how to share. So can everyone see this?
Yes.
Great. So I want to introduce myself first. Thank you so much. It's always interesting to hear someone else describe yourself to you, so I like that. But as she said, my name is Mallory Mensberg. I work for the Menninger Clinic. Right now, I'm the program coordinator for the Adolescent Intensive Outpatient Program. Basically, I like to think of that as a step down program for anyone who is hospitalized or in an inpatient program, and maybe a little bit of a step up for someone who is receiving outpatient services, so they see a therapist once a week. So it's for kiddos who need a little bit more services and a little bit more support than they might already be getting. So going through this year has been challenging for all of us, I can only imagine, but getting to be the program coordinator for the Adolescent IOP has helped me get to know how challenging it's been for a lot of the teens, for a lot of our adolescents as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about the mental health impact on those teens. So one of the first things I want to talk about is mental health stats, what adolescent mental health typically looks like right now. So the National Institute of Mental Health shared that depression and bipolar disorder affect 14% of youth aged 13 to 17. So that's pretty significant. We would say depression is one of the most commonly diagnosed disorders. We find that 11% of adolescents met the criteria for major depressive disorder or dysthymia, a less severe but more persistent depressive disorder. And then nearly 1 in 3 adolescents, 31%, will meet criteria for an anxiety disorder by the age of 18. So as you can see, anxiety and depression make up the bulk of any diagnosis that the adolescents typically receive. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental health disorders of childhood and adolescence, and you can have different kinds of anxiety affecting young people at different times in development. So you can have phobias, separation anxiety, those primarily affect younger children. You can have social anxiety or generalized anxiety. Those typically develop later as peer relationships become a little bit more important. And then we know that there's nearly a 2-fold increase in mood disorders. So those are things like bipolar disorder or depression from 13 to 18, from 8.4% to 15.4%. So we can see that as kids get older, they're much more likely to receive a mental health diagnosis. So while this is a time that many of us can attest is already very challenging, right? Adolescence, this is the exact time that so many mental health concerns are presenting themselves, and it appears to be worsening, not getting better. So teens who had a depressive episode is up 37% between 2005 and 2014. High school students today have more anxiety symptoms and are twice as likely to see a mental health professional as teens in the 1980s. And interestingly, the research has also found there's a gender disparity in the mental health or in mental health, specifically mood disorders, remember, depression, bipolar. So anxiety and panic disorders change from equal female to male prevalence to a 2-to-1 female to male prevalence after puberty. Adolescent girls are also more than twice as likely to experience depression than boys, 15.9 versus 7.7. And then all anxiety disorder subtypes were more frequent in girls than boys. So social phobia, any specific phobias, panic, PTSD, separation disorder, all of those. A lot of the research tends to focus on trying to figure out why there's a gender disparity. There isn't a lot of definitive research on that, but it is something that we're continuing to try and understand. So we're looking at how COVID has impacted these kids. And there was some research done that about 46% of almost 1,000 parents of teens said their child had shown signs of a new or worsening mental health condition since the start of the pandemic. Teen girls, again, appear to be bearing the brunt of worsening symptoms, with 36% of them and 19% of boys reporting an increase in anxiety symptoms. So again, that gender disparity. And that goes the same with depression, 31% for girls, 18% for boys reporting an increase in depression symptoms. Interestingly, girls and boys had similar rates of negative changes in their sleep. So 24 for girls, 21 for boys, withdrawing from family and aggressive behavior. So those tended to be similar. So obviously there were some significant changes in the mental health statistically in teens during the pandemic. So we're going to take a look at sort of what was and what is going on to contribute to some of that. So I wanted to see, can you guys see the PowerPoint on the whole screen, or is it just broken down? Not sure.
Oh, there you go. Now we can see the.
Okay, sorry. So obviously with COVID and the pandemic, there were some big changes that all of us were dealing with, right? Everyone began wearing masks. This all started a little bit more than a year ago. I think March 17th was my first day working from home. So we're almost a year and 2 months. Stay-at-home orders began. Big changes in how we spent our time at home. So hobbying from home, lots of people picked up new hobbies, began doing different things. 24/7 news cycle. Typically in the beginning, we found ourselves watching the news constantly. My partner, he was searching the COVID death rates, infection rates constantly, so much so that we had to pull back from that. Additionally, social, physical distancing from friends and family. So you've got the people who are closest to you, you're having to take a break from or not be able to get support from. School from home was really difficult. That often coincided with work from home. So now you've got parents and children all working from home at the same time. And then you've got loss of privacy, loss of people in your lives, loss of structure, everything that came with that. So those were some of the big changes. And so let's take a look at how that impacted our teams. How did it impact students? So one of the biggest changes was the loss of structure. A lot of kids stopped being able to go to school in person, and a lot of schools, our time in school tends to build a lot of structure into our lives, builds normalcy into our life. So kids are learning what expectations for behavior are, what academic expectations are. We're learning how to interact and engage with adults that are not our parents. We are learning how to engage with our peers. Once the pandemic started, students had to self-motivate to do classes, to do homework. So the entire structure of their days really changed. Additionally, their social interactions changed, right? So they were no longer able to interact with teachers, school personnel. They had to learn how to interact online in a way that they've never had to before. Additionally, schools bring exposures to different cultures, different perspectives, different ways of living that without being there in person, you really lose the ability to experience all of that. And then because there's no school, there's really a loss of extracurricular activities and oftentimes a loss of fun. So we lose the participation in these activities. Oftentimes these activities help students be more attractive applicants to colleges or universities. Future employers are looking. And then lastly, they're an important part of students' identities. So oftentimes students are their athletic abilities or their time in drama and in the play, a lot of those things are part of who they are and how they see themselves. Additionally, there were closures. So not every student works, but lots of students do. So with closures of schools and of businesses, a lot of kids lost the ability to make a paycheck, to be able to pay for things that are important to themselves, clothes, music, activities, provide for transportation, or even assist their families. Lots of kids that I know typically work and provide some of that income to their parents. Additionally, some kids lose the ability to save for college or anything else they want to do in their future. So this disruption has meant not only that students have to change the way they learn in high school, but then they have to take more personal responsibility, be accountable for engaging in learning in a way that they've never had to before. They may find that their teachers are less adept at managing the online environment. I can very much confirm that when I started doing online therapy with adolescents, they were much better at Zoom. They were helping me figure out when I was muted. When I didn't know how to turn the camera on, they were much better. So I can only imagine it was just the same for some of their teachers at school. Seniors in school had a very specific challenge that not all other students had. So they were in their last year of school, and I think that's the case last year and this year. So they might be worried about being able to qualify, especially for seniors who are in their senior year this year. This will be their second year into the pandemic. They worry they may not be fully prepared for college admission. They worry that, the pandemic, while people are being vaccinated right now, some mask mandates are going away. We don't know what the winter is going to look like. So the pandemic impacts their future plans. Oftentimes students in their senior year, if there's schools closing down, they lose their last shot at things that are part of their identity, like a sports season or performing with the choir or in the play, things like that. Also, the possibility of missing out on milestone experiences. So prom, getting to walk the stage at graduation, having your family there. They might miss a formal initiation in the freshman class. Oftentimes when you go away to college, become a freshman, one of the most exciting parts is getting to orient yourself to your new peers, to the new place that you're going to be, and a lot of them are going to miss out on that. Some means not deciding what personal mementos to bring, no tearful goodbyes with parents. A lot of these things are normal milestones that students face, and they're missing out on that. If they weren't planning to leave home, it means not going to campus orientation, not attending first day of work, not going to vocational school, anything like that, also missing out on. So what can help? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about what as parents can we do, and then what can we help our kiddos understand, how can they help themselves. So one of the best things that we can do for our kiddos is refrain from trivializing. So the COVID-19 pandemic, while many families were at home and not particularly impacted, it is a global pandemic. There's a lot happening, and it's a scary time. It's a trying time for everyone. Everyone is at their wits' end. Everyone is burnt out and trying the best that they can. So helping our kids know that we understand that missing out of high school, missing out on the things that they're doing is a big deal, and we get that. Helping them understand also that emotional expression is good. It's okay to feel and express your emotions. Being able to identify and understand that and process some of those emotions is an important part of that healing process. Focusing on the positives is always important. Understanding that while things may seem bleak or not great right now, that things are going to get better. However, we want to make sure that we aren't always trying to silver line things that maybe don't necessarily need to be silver lined. We want to make sure that our kids know that it's okay to be sad and it's okay to be upset. Creating special occasions. So as we've been missing out, it has been really important to create activities or ways to celebrate things that we haven't been able to. So I remember when the pandemic first started, my brother's 40th birthday, we all did a car parade and we had a mariachi band. We wanted to make it a very special time because we weren't able to be in person. Additionally, sending out graduation announcements or having some kind of ceremony or any way to mark transitions are really important. Reframing the situation, again, acknowledging the grief and the loss. Obviously, none of this is what you were expected. However, gratitude can also be helpful to see how fortunate we are, shifting the focus so that they can maybe hopefully see what they've learned and what they've gained. And making self-care a priority. That goes for us and for our kiddos, right? So making sure that we're taking time to take care of ourselves. So if we need privacy, if we need time alone, that we take all of that we need. So for the kiddos, right, for our teens, how do we help them? One of the best things that we can do is help them stay connected to their high school friends, but not necessarily the negativity, right? So while adhering to good safety guidelines, if they're able to do that and they're able to see their friends, then it's important to do that. If they aren't able to meet in person, then making sure that there are Zoom sessions or Zoom appointments anytime that they can spend together. I know in the beginning, several friends and I, we would play board games online. There are many websites for that. We would have happy hours, or we'd have a glass of wine together or watch a TV show together. That's really important. Additionally, I know a lot of seniors going away wanted to try and connect to their freshman class, and they were able to do that via Zoom, something that I think is really neat and I hope sticks around even after the pandemic. However, staying connected to the negativity is really tough. I think we all are connected to our screens, every screen in our home. But like I said, we really need to be able to put that down. I said my partner was looking at COVID death rates constantly in different countries as things were getting worse in India. He was looking at those and we were talking about it constantly. And it made it difficult to go to sleep. It made it difficult to not feel sad and upset myself. So we had to have a discussion and an agreement to put that away, or maybe only talk about it for 20 or 30 minutes and then move on. Taking care of your body and mind continues with the self-care. So making sure that you're exercising, staying in shape or just getting moving. One of the things that any doctor you go to, any therapist, any counselor, anyone will tell you that we know that exercise is good for our mental health and for our body. It's tough sometimes to make ourselves do it, but we know how important it is. So looking for at-home workouts, health and fitness tips, anything, there's so much online to find. Again, making ourselves do what's right for our body. So eating healthy foods. It's not necessarily whether you lose weight, gain weight. It's not really important about the scale, but it's how you feel. I like to talk about ice cream a lot with the teens. I eat a lot of ice cream. It's a very good coping skill for me, but sometimes when I eat a lot of ice cream, I don't always feel very good. And so sometimes eating better and eating in a way that makes me feel, I don't know, fresh and alert can be even a better coping skill. So sometimes I have to decide if it's an eat good day or an eat ice cream day, and both make me feel good at different times. Getting plenty of sleep, really important. One of the things that we talk about with our teens is sleep hygiene, and it's helpful to have a routine. So we want our kids to be doing the same things every day before they go to bed, waking up around the same time. On the weekends that can shift a little bit, but we really want them to be in a pattern so that that structure can be really helpful for them. Giving yourself a break, helpful for everyone. It's natural to feel bad or upset or not so great sometimes. And it's important to validate those feelings, know that it's okay to recognize them. Even when you think other people may be suffering more than you, it's okay to still be sad or upset about your situation. And then we talked about this, that everyone is struggling during the pandemic. People are at their wits' end, people are really being tried. And so being able to give other people a break too can be really helpful. Some of the relationships or couples that I've talked to through the pandemic, we've talked about how do you cut the other person a little bit of slack? How do you help them, know that you're both doing your best and not to snipe at each other as much. So should I be worried? What's natural, what's not so natural? When should I know that we should go talk to someone, or I should be thinking about getting a therapist for my kiddo? So we're going to talk about both anxiety and depression, just to give you guys a little bit of a summary or I guess a little bit of a graphic to see what's typical for anxiety and depression. So typical anxiety comes and goes situationally. However, clinical anxiety, what we're looking for are uncontrollable worries, excessive worrying. We're looking for restlessness, feeling disconnected from other people or from the world. Additionally, with anxiety, you're going to get mental mental health symptoms, but you're also going to get physical health symptoms, interestingly. So you're going to get maybe nausea, loss of appetite. You can get lightheadedness, panic attacks, increased heart rate. You're going to get, again, sweating, muscle tension. So any of those, typically what we're looking for are big changes in someone. So if you have a kiddo who maybe does some worrying, and that's pretty typical, but during the pandemic was able to continue on and get the things done, then that's usually okay. What we're looking for is a kiddo who never really was anxious about things, and now we've got excessive worry. We've got uncontrollable worries, we've got stomach cramps, we've got nausea a lot of the days, we've got, if they are back in school, maybe even staying home from school because they're so ill. So we're, again, looking for those big changes. And then with depression, similarly, we are looking for big changes in the behavior and how someone is feeling. So we've got helplessness, thoughts of death, anger, inability to concentrate, weight changes, sleep problems, energy loss. A lot of these can overlap with each other, but what we're looking for is several of them together and enough to be clinically relevant. So we've got weight changes on here, but if someone is losing a little bit of weight, but they're sleeping okay, they're able to concentrate, they're getting their work done, that's really not something that we're going to want to look at. If we are talking to someone and they've got thoughts of helplessness or hopelessness, along with some of those weight changes, then we're going to want to have a deeper discussion. Some of the parents that I talk to often ask me questions about kids who have suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts, what we call it. So we want to be really clear that suicidal ideation is something we should take seriously. And we often find that parents, an old idea that went around for a little bit is that they were looking for attention. And we want to make sure that that isn't the case. We don't believe that. We believe that when a child indicates suicidal ideation, we should take it seriously each and every time. So some of the parents, when they talk to me, they ask me, they indicate a worry or a fear about bringing it up to their child. They say, I don't want to put it in their mind if it's not already there. And what we have found, what research has found, is that that isn't really the case. That if your child is thinking about suicide or is suicidal, that those thoughts are already there. And the things that we're looking for are if they have a plan, have they put a lot of thought into it? And when we get confirmation that that's where they're at, then we want to move on that. So we want to talk to a therapist, we want to go to a hospital, we want something to be done, not just dismissed. So that gives us an idea of sort of what's normal, although a lot of the kids are dealing with going back to school, and I think we're going to have some different anxieties with that. Again, we're looking for big changes. So even as they go back to school, if you start to see some of those changes happen then I would get in touch with someone. So this is my name and my information. And if you have any questions, happy to answer that now, but also you are welcome to email me, give me a call, happy to answer anything if it comes up.
Thank you so much. I was throughout this whole presentation, I was like, I know that this is mostly about teens, but I feel like everyone here can relate to some of the things that you talked about and like the way that we were feeling or things that we were doing to try to feel better or stay connected. So we are going to open the floor for questions. Since we're a smaller group today, if anyone would like to unmute themselves in order to ask their question, we can definitely do that. Or you can utilize the chat box to ask any questions that you have. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started with the first question. Are there any tips that you can offer for starting a serious conversation around mental health with a teen?
Yes, I think starting any conversation with a teen is challenging. You know, I'm trying to think, I lead an adolescent group right now. I'm trying to think back to, I saw them yesterday and I'll see them tomorrow, about how best to get them to open up. One of the best ways that I have found to get kids to open up is to make space for them to talk. Oftentimes parents want to ask a lot of questions, want to probe, want to give advice. I think one of the best ways is to bring up a topic and really let them share. So don't put down anything that they're saying. Don't try and direct the conversation. Don't try and offer guidance, but let them have the floor and share what they feel comfortable sharing.
Okay, thank you. And that actually helps lead into my next question. You just mentioned don't ask a billion questions, but are there any specific questions that we should be asking about their mental health in regard to the pandemic?
Yes, I think one of the things that in the presentation I talked a lot about, or a little bit about, is social interactions. So we want to make sure that they are getting an opportunity to talk with the people that are important to them, share what's important to them. So I think we can be asking them, do you feel like you're able to talk with your friends? Have you had enough time with them? Not always possible that we can get them more time, but making sure that we're asking those questions. Finding out how their sleep is, how they're feeling. I think part of it is really just being observant. So I know parents are looking at their kids, so looking at their eating, looking at their sleeping, what is their anxiety like? If they're sick a lot, that's something we want to look at. In terms of depression, asking them, we're trying to figure out if clients are maybe not interested in things they used to be interested in. And oftentimes I know parents want to ask kids like, oh, you used to like skating. How come you don't like skating anymore? And that's okay. We want to ask those questions. We just want to do it in a way that isn't as probing as we might typically want to be. Kids like space. That's just sort of who they are.
Awesome, thank you. So my next question, if you do start to notice some of those bigger changes that you discussed, and you do feel like maybe you should seek help, some people may not really know where to go. Are there any suggestions that you have or any specific resources that you could share?
So if you need help or assistance, you are always welcome to reach out to me. My number and email are listed. If we can't help, I can always offer referrals. There are therapists all around Houston. There are also free and low cost therapists available. I know Legacy offers some counseling. I know the Montrose Center offers low cost or sliding scale counseling for those in LGBTQ community. Um, you can go to Psychology Today and look up different therapists by part of town that you're in. You can look up what sort of different topics that you're looking for. You can look up, any number of parameters on a therapist there, and that's really helpful. I think you can also find reviews, costs, things like that on Psychology Today. And then you could always go to the Menninger Clinic, which is really great, and you could come see me.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's been awesome, this awareness series. It's allowed us to share a lot of resources that maybe people weren't as familiar with, including the Menninger Clinic. So that is very, very good. Okay, so another question that I have, sometimes people are, I know adults may be a little bit hesitant to seek help, because they are afraid of the stigma that is associated with mental health, or sometimes maybe they don't want to take medications. So for children who are diagnosed with depression or anxiety, are they going to have to take medication? And if so, is that something that they have to take lifelong or temporarily?
Yeah. It's a great question. So, as a therapist, I do not prescribe medication. My job is to do talk therapy. However, a lot of research suggests that the best outcome is going to be a joint effort with talk therapy and psychiatric medications. However, that isn't necessary for all people, and everyone has the right to say that that just isn't what they're looking for. Sometimes we can get enough progress and we can get where we want to go without medications, and that's perfectly fine with a therapist. If you have a therapist who's making you feel bad or making you feel uncomfortable that you need to take medications, you should find someone else who is not putting pressure on you to do that. Medications can be situational. So situational depression oftentimes comes with a crisis or an acute issue, and you can take antidepressants for a limited amount of time. Some other medications, we might suggest someone to continue to take them for a couple of years to see how things are going. I think a lot of the stigma comes from misunderstanding psychiatric medications. So oftentimes I like to use an analogy or compare it to if you had diabetes. If your brain wasn't, or if your body wasn't making insulin in the way that you needed it to, you would take medication, you would take insulin, you would do things that you would need to. So oftentimes with depression, our brain is either not making the right chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, or isn't picking up the chemicals in the correct way. And so medication can assist with that. It's not to make you ecstatic every day. It's not to make you joyous, some kind of joyful zombie. Our goal is to bring your sort of equilibrium up a tiny little bit to make you on the same playing field as everyone else. So I think a lot of the worry is that you're going to be on this medication and it's going to make you a different person. We're just trying to make it so that your happy days can actually feel happy and your sad days can just feel sad, not devastating. So we're just trying to move your sort of spectrum, I guess, a little bit up, a little bit higher so that you can be like everyone else.
Thank you. Yeah. So earlier in the presentation, you mentioned that compared to children in previous generations, rates of depression and anxiety are much higher. And I know you mentioned that there's, research and stuff that's being done, but can you maybe provide us with a little bit of insight as to why that may be the trend?
So the research is a little bit all over the place. I will say what some of it says, that the sociopolitical situation was very traumatic and traumatizing for a lot of people. The current political and economic situation for people can be devastating or distressing. Oftentimes we are also exposed to a lot of that. So while our situation might be okay, we are much more exposed to the fact that other people around the world, around the country are struggling. And so we are taking in some of that as well. We also wonder if some of it might be more acceptance and discussion about these topics as well. So people may have been experiencing anxiety and depression for a long, long time, and now we are much more open to treating it, discussing it, making it available. I think the biggest ones tend to be about sort of context of life and the way things are changing, and are things getting harder? Are we being exposed to more difficult challenges just as things change?
That's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what research continues to uncover there.
I think there was some research that I saw recently looking at sort of in terms of presidents, like the different 8 to 4 years of different presidents and like what depression and anxiety looked like in that time. I don't think they had many conclusions, but they were beginning to take a look at that. So that could be really interesting sort of to see, how the United States ebbs and flows in that way.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah. So you mentioned at the end or towards the end of the presentation, talking about suicide. So what age do you think it's appropriate to start discussing things like self-harm, or is it just dependent on the child?
I think it is dependent on the child. I think you have some 12-year-olds who never think about it, who it's not on their mind, it's not something that's bothering them. So I don't really see a need to bring it up. If you have a kiddo, though, who's 12 and is starting to self harm, is cutting, is restricting, is thinking about suicide, then you want to bring that up. So I think anytime your child is bringing it up is the right time to be talking about it. But probably not earlier.
Do you believe that children will have better resiliency skills in the future because of their experience with this pandemic?
I have to say, some of my colleagues and I talk about that we are so thankful we are not in school right now, because I don't know how some of these teens are doing it and still doing well in class or in their schooling. We see them they're having to spend all day on their computer. They're having to be accountable to no one but themselves and, schools at the end of the semester. It's so tough. And a lot of these kids are really either doing okay or thriving. So I can only imagine that they're building up their resiliency based on this. But I think some of them may have some trauma from it as well. They may have some PTSD. They may have to process some of the stuff that they've gone through. A lot of us hopefully have had to stay home in homes that were lovely and safe and full of food and warmth and care. But there are a lot of kids out there who had to stay at home in homes that were not like that. And so I think there is going to be some trauma that has to get processed afterwards.
I've had the same conversation. Just so thankful that I was not in school during this time. Because even though in college, I took some online classes, not all of my classes were online. So, yeah, I definitely feel for students who are going through this pandemic and having to make so many adjustments, learning and working virtually.
And it's been tough. I think, I have had maybe 10 or so new clients over the past year, maybe 15, who I've never met. I've never met them in person. We've been doing therapy, and I'm asking these clients to come to session and be vulnerable and trust me and get to know me. And they've never even met me. And so I can only imagine as students started a new year, as they were in classes with people they didn't meet, had to do projects with people they didn't know. I mean, I can only imagine what it was like for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then I have one last question. So if anyone thinks of any questions that they have, you can definitely put those in the chat or unmute yourself. But my final question is, at the end of each of these programs that we do, I like to ask the speaker if you could give one final piece of advice, or what is the one thing you would want us to take away from this presentation today?
Oh, that is so tough. Okay, hold on. What is the one thing I want you to take away? I guess I've been thinking a lot about how I am struggling and have struggled during this past year with different things, being upset, being tired of being at home, all of that. And I can only imagine the rest of us have dealt with similar things. And we often look to our kiddos to deal with things and get over them. And it is helpful to remember that they are just learning how to manage their emotions, how to process difficult times. And so when we struggle with them during these times, to remember that it's a global pandemic, to remember that they have meltdowns. You know, I can't tell you how many times I have had a meltdown in the last year and cried to my partner and just, bawled. And that was okay. It was perfectly acceptable. But kids, when they have meltdowns, we tell them to, don't yell in the house, or don't slam doors in the house, or, you're not, pick up the grades, or whatever the issue might be. And so to remember that they are having meltdowns just like we are, and that's okay.
That is great advice. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for this wonderful presentation and conversation. This was wonderful. In the chat it says great presentation. Yeah, this was a wonderful presentation. And I know everyone on here is going to have something that they can take away for their kiddos or even for themselves. So if you're like me and you walk away from a presentation and then 2 days later, you think, oh my gosh, I should have asked this question, you could definitely email us at healtheducator@thewomensfund.org. I will also share Mallory's information in the follow-up email. As she mentioned earlier, you can reach out to her as well. I will be sending out, like I just mentioned, a follow-up email that has a survey link, and we would really appreciate if you would take a few moments of your time to complete the survey. Let us know what you liked, what we could improve, and topics that you would be interested in hearing. I also encourage you to visit our website, thewomensfund.org, to see what upcoming events we have, and also follow our social media pages. We post there frequently about things that we have going on as well. Our awareness series for the month of June is brain health, and we have a presentation next Wednesday with the Alzheimer's Association titled 10 Warning Signs of Alzheimer's. So we look forward to hopefully seeing you there, and we thank you so much for joining us today. Mallory, again, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here with us.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you.